Admiral turned dissident, the break from the Federation. Yuri Grom's rise from esteemed admiral of the Federal Navy to the formidable leader of an independent power stands as one of the most dramatic turns in recent galactic history. Born in 3256 within the Uri system, he joined the Federal Fleet Academy at an early age. By 3265, Yuri had earned the rank of Rear Admiral commanding a cruiser, ascending further to Vice Admiral by 3270 and Full Admiral of the 12th Fleet by 3276. He was widely expected to become an instructor, a beacon of naval values, until the unthinkable occurred. In 3301, citing pervasive corruption within Federal command, Grom retired abruptly, taking loyal pilots of the fleet with him. This mass defection shocked Federal leadership and marked the birth of reinvention. Settling on his home turf of Uri, Grom and his followers founded the EG Union, which soon evolved into the EG Pilots. Their success in the 3302 Dangerous Games elevated them from a fringe faction to a recognized power, with their capital established in Clyarma. Grom declared himself dictator and introduced a military governance styled around discipline, integrity, and an unwavering rejection of corruption. His followers spoke of his charisma and honor, often noting how, through negotiation and respect, he persuaded settlements to surrender without violence. Meanwhile, the Federation branded him a traitor. President Hudson denounced Grom as a cancer, and though his writings were banned, quiet sympathy for him persisted within the ranks. Federal cadets continued clandestine discussions in whispers. Tensions reached a critical point in September 3307, when Grom accepted an invitation to a formal diplomatic conference in Delta Pavonis. Accompanied by Federal Ambassador Delphine Dumont, he hoped to chart a path of mutual cooperation. Initially, the talks seemed promising. By September 24th, proposals emerged allowing Delta Pavonis to remain independent while fostering political and commercial ties with both sides. But on September 30th, tragedy struck. Undercover Federal agents attempted to detain Grom at Kessler City, triggering violence. Grom escaped aboard his megaship, Indomitable, as nearby Federal fleets attacked. By October 7th, his forces had seized the Federation flagship Freedom's Foundation. In a gesture that spoke to his character, Grom spared remaining Federal crews and granted them safe passage, but issued a portentous warning that the ambush would not be forgotten. In the fallout, Federal diplomatic channels denounced the capture attempt and distanced themselves from presidential actions. Ambassador Dumont personally apologized to Grom, underscoring the fracture within the Federation's own structure. Despite this rupture, the Federation remained steadfast for many, viewing Grom through the prism of treachery. Through conflict and controversy, Grom's authority solidified. His slogan, "Freedom among the Stars," carried fervent meaning to his followers who had embraced a future not under a corrupted regime, but crafted through discipline, honor, and independence. Grom balanced this military structure with restraint. He treated captives honorably and maintained the appeal of his rule with integrity rather than brute force. Rising from Uri, forging the EG pilots into a power. Uri, light years from Federal command and suffocating bureaucracy, was where Admiral Yuri Grom's quiet rebellion transformed into a formidable force. Born in the system he would later emancipate, Grom severed ties with the Federation in 3301, provoking shock across the galaxy. That decision ignited the creation of the EG Union, a loose alliance of like-minded pilots who followed him away from corruption. In the decade that followed, Grom was no longer an admiral bound by regulation. He became a visionary commander, leading a fledgling movement built on merit, discipline, and belief. By 3302, this ragtag group had coalesced into the EG Pilots, an idealistic yet disciplined faction that captured the surprise victory in the Dangerous Games. The celebrations echoed from Clyarma to the core systems, and the pilots who gathered under Grom's banner found purpose. Grom declared their victory both symbolic and strategic. They were no longer a fringe faction, but a recognized galactic power. The rise was rapid. From defensive Uri stronghold to a burgeoning influence across multiple systems, e.g. pilots expanded their reach with precision. In March 3304, Grom inaugurated a project to construct a shipyard in the distant CPC 26743 system. He called on independent pilots to deliver commodities necessary for building Farragut-class vessels, promising rewards and security. Participants rallied, understanding the implications. This was more than infrastructure. It was the seed of autonomy and deterrence against a looming alien threat. Under Grom's leadership, this initiative became a rallying point. Pilots who delivered materials contributed not just to shipyard construction, but to a growing wave of solidarity. Urali's influence rippled outward as systems pledged allegiance or cooperation, and e.g. pilots began organizing, covert infiltration, support for insurgents, and strategic expansion, all coordinated with military precision and political nuance. Political observers in Empire and Alliance circles began to take this independent movement seriously. Though still labeled traitorous by federal leadership, Grom's presence had spread across hundreds of exploited and fortified systems. Alliances were formed, trade routes opened, and diplomacy cautiously revisited. In 3307's Delta Pavoni summit, e.g. pilots' prominence became impossible to ignore, though Federation hostility remained central. It started on October 18th, when Yuri Grom delivered a quiet, passionate address to his followers. He told them that the games presented their best chance to emerge from the shadows. He called on every skilled flyer in the faction, test pilots, smugglers, retired naval officers, to step up and represent Yuri. The phrase "fly for freedom under discipline," which he used to rally them, soon became their rallying cry. Competition was fierce. On October 25th, e.g. pilots dismantled expectations. Their formations, built on tight coordination rather than technological advantage, repeatedly outmaneuvered better-equipped rivals. Veteran observers from Empire and Alliance quarters noticed the discrepancy in tactics. e.g.'s pilots relied less on raw firepower and more on precision, timing, and predictive maneuvers. Grom had drilled them in unpredictability. By October 30th, galactic broadcast metrics began to shift. Live feeds showed e.g. ships executing flawless escape or maneuvers, coordinating defensive stands with uncompromising synergy. Stardom came fast. Pilots shouted gratitude for the discipline that Grom had instilled. Spectators were galvanized by their story. A united faction defined by camaraderie had triumphed over bureaucracies and corporate-backed teams. On November 2nd, the grand finale drew record audiences. Facing off against a top-tier Federation squadron, e.g. pilots won the day. As the last explosive salvo faded, the screen showed e.g.'s emblem and the words, "Champions of the Dangerous Games." For viewers across light years, it wasn't just a competition win. It was the moment a nameless faction became known. The aftermath was immediate. On November 4th, in Urali's capital orbiting Grom's homeworld, thousands cheered beneath fireworks and transmissions. Ships painted in e.g. colors paraded through system space. Pilots returned from stations hollowed out by support teams, as flags hung from every hangar bay and cargo bay. Systems that had once ignored the name now clamored to send representatives, pledging loyalty or seeking trade agreements. Galactic analysts scrambled to catch up. By December, e.g. pilots had risen in the rankings, officially recognized alongside established powers. The Federation's initial disdain gave way to alarm. They could not ignore a unified fleet that now commanded both skill and public sentiment. Grom's reputation soared beyond dissident and admiral. He became the figurehead of a movement that had proven itself in competition and public eyes. But Grom did not let victory corrupt the mission. In post-game statements beginning late November, he framed their win not as triumph over others, but as the birth of a new standard for power built on integrity and unity. He invited independent systems to share the fruits of cooperation. His tone was firm, yet inclusive, showing restraint typical of a leader harnessing nascent authority. Diplomacy and betrayal, the Delta Pavoni's summit turmoil. September 17th, 3307 marked a rare moment of direct diplomacy between the Federation and the independent EG pilots. Held on the conference World Kessler City in the Delta Pavonis system, it was the first time since his defection that Yuri Grom sat down at a table with a federal representative, Ambassador Delphine Dumont. Grom arrived aboard his renowned megaship, the Indomitable, a symbol of his break from the past, while the Federation delegation traveled in the Venerable Freedoms Foundation. Grand Duke Simeon Petrescu, ruler of the system, had arranged the summit hoping to secure allegiances or ties that could benefit his autocracy. The optics were powerful, with news feeds broadcasting the warm first gestures between Grom and Dumont. He appeared taken aback, but offered genuine hospitality. For a week, diplomacy seemed viable. By September 24th, speculation swelled that the autocracy of Delta Pavonis might retain independence while establishing political and trade relations with both sides. It was an unexpected thaw. But things unraveled abruptly on September 30th. Grom declared live over the Vox network that the entire summit had been nothing more than a trap. Undercover federal agents had attempted to capture him at gunpoint inside Kessler City. The crisis escalated quickly. Eva's personal guards sacrificed themselves to help him escape to the Indomitable, where his forces then came under attack. President Hudson confirmed shortly after that the Federation had indeed sought to neutralize Grom, branding him a dangerous traitor. With hostilities underway, the host of the summit, Grand Duke Petrescu, was compelled to deny any involvement in the plot. The Federal Diplomatic Corps issued a rare public rebuke of Hudson's actions, denouncing the breach of diplomatic immunity and offering a formal apology to Grom and his delegation on October 4th. Dumont personally expressed her regret at the betrayal, stressing that the negotiations had been sincere and that she had had no knowledge of the trap. The conflict erupted into full combat, culminating on October 7th when Grom's forces boarded and captured the Freedoms Foundation. Grom offered mercy to the survivors, granting them safe passage, a gesture signaling that his leadership was built not on vengeance, but on calculated authority. Even in triumph, he reminded President Hudson that betrayal bears enduring consequences. In the fallout, the Federation found itself fractured. Many within regarded Hudson's gambit as reckless, while others viewed Grom's success as confirmation of his threat. The diplomatic corps, in contrast, sought to preserve integrity, warning the broader galactic community that political expediency should not trump trust. For Grom and his followers, the events in Delta Pavonis reshaped perceptions. From dissident to honorable adversary, he emerged as someone who could negotiate with grace and strike only when justice demanded it. The summit's overt failure became a pivotal story, the Federation's duplicity revealed, and Grom's resilience cemented. Dictator of Clyarma, negotiating honor among systems. In early 3308, Yuri Grom stood in the Grand Council chamber of Clyarma, the newly proclaimed capital of his fledgling state. He had taken the title of dictator not as an act of tyranny, but as a symbol of leadership forged through discipline and honor. Clyarma itself spanned 3 close-orbiting bodies, known for their rich mineral belts and strategic positioning in frontier space. There, Grom's rule was less autocratic than calculated, anchored not in fear, but in the promise of mutual respect and principled governance. The consolidation of power had been swift. Within months of their victory in the dangerous games, EG pilots had clamored for a seat around Grom, urging him to bind them into a functioning polity. In March 3308, he accepted, naming Clyarma as the center of his authority. Pilots were assigned civilian roles, local governors, or maritime commanders based on merit. He often reminded them, "We serve the ideals we defend, not ourselves." His first formal act as dictator came on June 10, 3308, when he welcomed envoys from neighboring independent systems, Tau Sharp, Harper's Loop, and Glean's World. The atmosphere was cautious yet hopeful. Grom addressed them with measured sincerity. Alliances, he proposed, should be forged not through coercion, but through reciprocity. The agreements that emerged were founded on shared trade routes, mutual protection pacts, and respect for each territory's sovereignty. Grom's clarity and forthrightness won trust where mere treaties had faltered. One notable episode unfolded when Harper's Loop delayed its tribute deliveries of rare metals critical for Clyarma's expanding shipyard. On September 2nd, he dispatched a delegation, armed not with threats, but with reminders of camaraderie and the benefits of alliance. By September 10th, deliveries resumed, and the Harper's Loop delegate signed a renewed agreement. As Grom's envoy departed, the delegate was overheard saying, "A leader who demands out of strength, not malice, uncommon in these parts." Meanwhile, EG Pilot's code of conduct grew rigidly uniform. Internal council boards were created to adjudicate disputes. Citizens and pilots could appeal directly to a chamber of peers, preserving accountability even as executive power concentrated. Grom's guiding principle was clear. Strength without principle breeds dominance. Our strength is measured by balance. And so, talk of dictatorship became reframed as governance of honor. In November 3308, the fragile stability of Clyarma was tested by an attempted coup launched by disaffected pilots who claimed that freedom was being sacrificed under the guise of security. Grom confronted them not with overwhelming force, but by granting them a hearing in the council chamber. The dialogue ended in a unanimous reaffirmation of Clyarma's path: security with empathy, authority with respect. Dissent was addressed, not erased. Diplomatic channels with the Federation slowly reopened, albeit with caution. In early 3309, trade delegates traveled to neutral systems, carrying Clyarma-crafted goods, resilient defense platforms, modular freighters, on the strength of the state's reputation. Grom had understood early that independence should be sustainable. By significantly lowering system taxes the following spring, he ensured Clyarma remained an attractive destination for immigrants and traders, not by coercion or subsidies, but by offering stability and fairness. In May 3309, solar observatories detected political turmoil in the nearby Empire-aligned Alicia cluster. Grom chose not to capitalize on the chaos militarily, but focused on mutual defense pacts with Alicia's border systems. Through measured diplomacy, Clyarma expanded cooperation while cultivating a reputation for discretion and honor. By mid-3309, Clyarma had entered an unorthodox league of equals, strategic allies exchanging intelligence, technology, and governance models. Admiral Grom had built not only a military faction, but a political structure rooted in respect and accountability. His title of dictator carried weight, but it was a mantle balanced by custom, consensus, and a seasoned commitment to justice. Within Clyarma's halls, statues of past dissenters were erected, not glorified but remembered with humility. Grom's own office overlooked the orbital docks, where ships arrived bearing not insignia of subjugation, but of commerce, science, and voluntary allegiance. Pilots passed news of improvements to life support, community councils, and fair munitions taxation. They spoke of Clyarma as a sanctuary structured by order, not oppression. As the system's influence spread, ambition remained checked. Grom's guiding words were carved into the council chamber's stone. Honor sustains alliances long after weapons rust. Power is strongest when wielded with empathy. Security must include respect. War by wits: how Grom commands loyalty without bloodshed. In an era of escalating conflict and political upheaval, Yuri Grom emerged not as a warlord fueled by brutality, but as a strategist whose greatest victories were won through cunning, respect, and moral discipline. It was this unique approach that defined his ascent and solidified the unwavering loyalty of those under his command. By early 3309, EG pilots had already demonstrated might in battle, but Grom understood that power born only from force would prove fragile. His true success lay in weaving a deeper thread of allegiance, one rooted in honor. On January 10th, he issued a decree: loyalty should not be enforced, but earned through consistent fairness. To live under his rule was not to be coerced, but to be part of a collective ideal. To underscore this philosophy, Grom introduced an ambitious initiative on March 22, 3309, the Cooperative Shield Program. Rather than conscription, pilots from allied worlds were invited to contribute not just resources, but ideas. They pooled engineering advancements, strategic simulations, and even entire ship schematics. Plans for clandestine songwriting evenings, where pilots shared stories rather than spears, were circulated. The gesture resonated. It transformed loyalty from a command to a cause. But most telling was Grom's handling of dissent. In July 3309, a dispute flared in the mining colony of Toronai when colonists accused EG authorities of imposing rigid quotas. A swift and peaceful delegation, led by Grom's advisor, was dispatched. They listened, compromised on production expectations, offered trade incentives, and implemented a fair oversight council. When Grom visited 2 weeks later, he was met not with suspicion, but with applause. This pattern continued. In September 3309, pirates launched a raid on supply lines to the Clyarma shipyard. Rather than retaliate with destruction, Grom sent a delegation that offered fair market alternatives and economic support to one of the raiding worlds. Shocked by restraint and sincerity, the pirates backed off, and several even integrated into EG's safety patrols, swearing allegiance. Diplomatic finesse defined his approach on the regional stage. During a tense standoff with the Alicia cluster in late 3309, Grom dispatched harvest cooperatives to struggling fields there and sent engineers to rebuild devastated stations, all without directly invoking power projection. The gesture quelled escalation and forged collaborative bonds. Instead of sending warships, Grom sowed goodwill. By early 3310, analysts marveled at how Grom had built the EG pilots into one of the most resilient powers, less through firepower and more through trust. He maintained a relentless intelligence network to protect his realm, but never abused it. Secret plots unfolded into justice decisions. Insurgent causes turned into council invitations. Bandit groups joined trade federations. Through this approach, shortages became bargaining chips, not weapons. Dissent became dialogue, not elimination. Clyarma became her stronghold not through fortress walls, but reputation. Citizens lived with intentional reverence, citing freedoms born not of forgiveness after suppression, but of rights handed even at risk. In the weight of galactic conflict, Grom proved that warfare need not mean bloodshed, that the strongest empires are those that bind people together with conviction rather than fear. His ascendance was a triumph of empathy, intellect, and restraint. And the loyalty he commanded? It was real because it was earned. Indomitable will, from battlefield escapes to empire restraint. December 3307 had barely begun when EG pilot's leader, Yuri Grom, found himself at another crossroads of fate, and again, he emerged unbroken. Just months after the deadly summit collapse in Delta Pavonis, Grom's resolve was tested once more, this time across the Imperium's periphery, where the tendrils of empire politics threatened to entangle even the most resolute of independents. It was on January 7th, 3308, that the first intelligence reports arrived. Imperial agents were attempting to destabilize Clyarma by inciting uprisings in adjacent systems. Rumors stated that local governors in the region, suppressive of Grom's ideology, plotted to assassinate him during a diplomatic visit. On January 14th, during a forum in the system of Tenchi Gate, conspirators struck. An explosive device shattered the building and left many injured. Grom himself was wounded in the arm. Protectors whisked him away to safety aboard the Indomitable, and thanks to his swift command, the conspirators were captured without fanfare. He ordered an immediate and impartial tribunal, displaying neither cruelty nor vengeance, but restraint and justice. This pattern repeated again. In late February, Imperial warships harassed EG pilots' convoys in the border systems. Grom ordered his pilots not to fire first. Instead, he dispatched emissaries to engage Imperial commanders, carrying embargoed pleas for peace. By April, most aggressions had ceased. Grom insisted that restraint and diplomacy were tools of strength, not weakness. Perhaps his most defining moment came during the Thargoid resurgence in May 3308. Reports of attacks on isolated systems filtered through faster-than-light traffic. A combined force of Empire and Alliance defense fleets was delayed, quarantined by bureaucracy. Grom dispatched EG pilots as first responders. Armed but unprovoked, he offered aid freely. By mid-May, he had organized refugee convoys, cleared debris, escorted stranded convoys to safe ports. His actions earned grudging admiration, even from imperial officials who declared his intervention both necessary and noble. His commitment was cemented during the summer of 3308. With the race for Alpha Centauri intensifying, Grom turned down an offer to annex the system through force. Instead, he brokered a tripartite non-aggression agreement between EG pilots, the Empire, and the local governance, ensuring peaceful trade access rather than conquest. He later said in an address, "Strength is not shown by occupation. It lies in being trusted not out of fear, but respect." By autumn, Clyarma had become something of a beacon, a polity marked not by brutality, but by resilience. Loyalty to Grom was often less about fear, more about admiration. Citizens spoke of his calm under fire, his discipline, his unwavering belief that force should be a last resort, not a first line. Meanwhile, the Federation reconsidered him. Hudson's regime softened critics, offering grudging respect where once only condemnation reigned. Some colonies reached out, exploring trade with EG pilots. A quiet thaw in imperial corridors followed too. Though Grom remained independent, he had earned a durable reputation, not only as a strategist, but as a leader of conscience.